want to focus on Romans chapter 12 a little bit this morning. I want to finish my series that I started a little while back on a healthy mind. And one of the things I've been saying all along is having a healthy mind is key to having a healthy life. A couple of Sundays ago, I made the statement that, we can look after ourselves physically. We can diet, we can exercise, and we can really look after ourselves physically and be healthy on the inside. But if we're not healthy in the mind, it affects everything we do. And so I want to finish that series on a healthy mind this morning as the last service of the year, and then we'll go into great things. I'm just going to give a little bit of a recap of where we've gone because I think it's important to follow through. It's been a little while, and just so that we're on the same page as we go into this new thought here this morning. One of the things that I said that I want to talk about is I want to deal with facing and overcoming depression. And a number of Sundays ago, I talked about that depression is real. These aren't my notes for Sunday. I just didn't want to scribble down different thoughts. I thought I'd just bring them up here and highlight some of the stuff that we talked about, and then we'll jump right in. But I said depression is real. One of the things that's happening in our society, in our world, is depression is one of the fastest growing aspects that's plaguing our society. I made mention of Statistics Canada did a survey, and it said 1 in 4 have been or are currently in or have experienced depression in some degree or other. And then I said the survey among pastors was 50%. Depression is something that's real. It's something that we don't always want to talk about because it makes us uncomfortable, because it makes us vulnerable. It tells people that we're hurting and that we're not sure how to work through things. And oftentimes what happens when we're facing depression is we go inside. We cover it up. We hide ourselves. We keep ourselves away from people. And as I said before, that's one of the most dangerous things we can do when we're struggling, is to hide ourselves. God is never interested in exposing us, highlighting our weaknesses, our struggles, the things that we have to push through. He's never about that. He's about coming alongside and bring healing and hope. And so I talked about depression is real. All of us have faced it in some way, according to statistics, in that aspect. One of the things that I said in my message on dealing with depression, that it is real, we have to learn to be honest with ourselves. Hey, I'm not doing well. Why is that so hard to say? I am not doing well. I think if I were to answer that question, if someone would ask me that question, it's because I don't want people to know that I struggle. When struggling is really a part of life. So we have to learn to be honest with ourselves. We're not bad. There's not a problem with us when we're struggling through things in our mindsets and wrestling through our circumstances. We're not bad. It's not necessarily even a negative thing. But acknowledging it is part of the process of bringing healing. I told you many examples throughout Scripture that people struggled with depression and how they worked through different strategies and difficulties in their life. And it's hard for us to be honest with people around us because sometimes we've been embarrassed and sometimes we've been hurt. And so that's why we tend to hold ourselves back. Then I said depression affects us. I'm just really skimming through some of this stuff. Depression affects people differently, so we have to learn not to compare ourselves with others. How I go through difficulties and struggles and sometimes having to work through things is often different than how you are. And the point isn't that you need to understand what I'm going through as much as we need to understand that we're going through it together. Working through things together. It happens, and the hardest thing to do is often we compare ourselves to other people. The other thing I said too with that aspect is we have to learn to be honest with people around us. It's not good for us to hide when we're struggling. And I made a note here, and I just highlighted here. We need to be honest with people around you. Not just any kind of people, but the right people. And all of us have made the mistake of sharing with somebody, and they went on the horn and began to tell everybody about everything and all kinds of stuff. And all in the name of, well, we want to pray for this person. No, you want to be able to tell the right people, but we have to involve people in our life. And then the last thing I talked about there was we need to learn to find perspective. It's difficult when all we see is negative. But I want to encourage you this morning that in the negative, if we look at the right things, there is still hope. There's still hope. So when I challenged you a number of Sundays ago that we need to find perspective, it's in the midst of it where hope is birthed. That's the amazing thing about God. In the midst of it, we think this: if it just goes away, I will be fine. If it just would get removed. How many of us have prayed this? God, would you just take it from me? Would you just take it away? Answer this prayer and take it away. And yet, when we speak that, God knows that the answer, listen to me, church, that the answer is in the situation. You see, when the children of Israel went to the Red Sea, they panicked and they thought life was over, they were going to die. But where was their answer? It was in the sea. God had provided a way for them in the midst of their circumstances. How else can you explain? As they walked through the Red Sea on dry ground and a wall of water on both sides, God always has an answer for us. Always. But it's not outside of the problem. It's in the midst of the circumstances. So I've learned, this is what I'm learning, this is a process for me. I've learned to begin now to ask, okay, God, I'm here. Where is the hope? I'm here. Where is my answer? I'm here. What am I not seeing that's there? I've used many examples of that by having my car keys in the palm of my hand and walking around asking my wife where my keys are. Maybe you're not like that. I'm like that all the time. And I can grump and grumble as I'm walking, making noise, banging stuff. Where are those keys? They're in your hand. Well, I was just checking to see if you were paying attention. Right? Because the answer is they're with us. I'm telling you, find hope in the midst of the circumstances you're going through. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's hard. But in that hardness, we tend to focus on the things that are hard. Begin to invite the Holy Spirit to come into those areas and say, God, show me where the way is in the midst of it. And then our praying isn't, Lord, get me out, but Lord, show me the way in. The other message I talked about overcoming influences and healthy thought patterns and how it's important for us how we think. I used the illustration there about when I went to camp many, many years ago that I rode this horse. And this horse is probably as old as the camp is, I'm sure. And it just followed the path. It didn't make difference. You pulled right or left. It just went its own way. It just went on the path that it's done for years. And I related to how that's frustrating, but our mind works the same way. It works with patterns. It just doesn't do it. It just doesn't go where it wants to. It goes in the patterns that are developed. And so sometimes the reason why when we're in a tight pinch and when circumstances are the highest and things, we go to the same way all the time is because those patterns have been developed. And so in that message, I talk about overcoming those negative influences and unhealthy thought patterns. And I just simply talked several things about it. First of all, I said it was important how we think. It's important how we think because how we think ultimately gives us the direction in which we go. Sometimes it's such a habit that we don't really think about it anymore because the pattern is there. But everything begins first with thought. Everything begins with thought. So if everything begins with thought and we go a certain direction, I can tell you then that we can think different. We can think different. So I talked about it's important how we think. And I use scriptures and we talked about that kind of stuff and things like that, but it's important how we think. The second thing I talked about there is the way we think can always change. So many times in my life I've used the excuse, this is how I'm made. This is the result of what I've learned. I can't help what I do, it's because this is just who I am. And I challenge us in those ideas to finding hope and overcoming. We need to believe the aspect that the way we think can always change. How do we do that? By the renewing of our mind. I talked about how can this all happen? And I said, first of all, if we are to overcome, am I making sense here? I can keep going? The problem I have in life is how do I sum all of that up? I've learned so many truths going to Bible school and church and all kinds of stuff, and I think I've relayed this to you before, that sometimes I've learned so many things, but they don't register. They're just thoughts, and that's a good idea, a good principle, So my question was, okay, if we can overcome our negative thoughts, if we can identify the things that we struggle with in our mind, and our mind's not healthy, and we learn to work through some of those things, you've said the answers in the midst of the situation, but how do I overcome? How do I learn? And so at the end of that message, I just gave you 3 important principles of what we can do with all this truth. And I said, first of all, if we're going to change the way we think, because how we change the way we think changes the patterns that we live. So we change our thinking, we change our patterns. So how do we compute this? And so I gave you just 3 really simple ways of how to articulate some of this stuff. And first of all, I said, if we're going to grow and learn and develop and change, we need to be aware of how we think. Be aware of it. Be aware when you're negative. Okay, I'm negative right now. Okay, I'm negative. If we're not aware of how we think, if we just keep on going, where the patterns won't change. So I said we need to be aware of how we think. And then I said we have to purpose our response. We have to purpose, don't just react, but think about how you're going to respond. Share your responses with others that you trust. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going to do. I've told you this many times. There's people that I phone all the time and say, you know what? This is exactly how I'm feeling right now. This is how I want to react. Speak to me. I want to be aware of I think, and I be aware of how I think, and I want to purpose my response. And oftentimes when I share my responses with people that I trust, they speak perspective into my life. Yeah, I mean, you're just seeing this aspect, but if you see this and this, it's like, oh man, I'm glad I phoned you. I saved a whole lot of headache. The problem often is in my life is I never did that for years because I was afraid if I would involve people in my life, they would think I'm stupid, I'm strange, and I'm dumb because that's what I heard. So then I didn't risk it all and tell anybody. But I'm telling you, if we want to change, we can't do it on our own. So we got to purpose our response. And then the third thing I said there, I said we need to make the necessary adjustments. Okay, you know that there's a problem. Now we need to make those adjustments. How many remember back in the day, now this is aging me and probably you, so maybe you won't respond, but how do you remember the old days in the dial radios in the vehicles? You were leaving a city and you were losing signal. And what you have to do? Dial a little bit more. Okay, there it is now, and pretty soon it was gone. You come to a city in your vehicle and you're finding the stations, and what do? You turn the dial. And as farther away you are, you have to adjust the dial. And so I want to paint that picture for you because that's how we change in life. We constantly have to dial. Now we just, then after the dial, then there was the buttons, that move the thing. And sometimes it wouldn't be, you still had a dial. Now it's digital, it just doesn't matter anymore. It just, you look at it and it does what you want almost, it seems. And the trouble with that is often we take that as how life needs to work. It should just happen on its own. But I want to tell you, healthy thinking and healthy mindset will never happen on its own. It's going to take work. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take wiping out, making mistakes, starting over, being discouraged and frustrated, all at the same time. I said this too. God is never disappointed when we're frustrated. God's never disappointed when we ask too many questions or we just simply give up. He doesn't go, I don't know what to do now. I don't know. He loves us far too much, and he's willing to walk us through whatever experiences we are. And so, like that radio and like that dial, we need to dial in, continually making adjustments to our life so that we begin to think different and act different. Because when we think different, we act different. Didn't I say that just before? Thinking is powerful. Everything begins first in the thoughts. Romans chapter 12. I know I've used this passage of scripture before, but I'm just going to have it open to there because we're going to end up jumping into that verse as well. So I want to finish my series now that I've preached 2 messages in one, and now I'm going to preach the third one. Hallelujah. So strap in. It's only 11:45. We have another hour to go. Praise the Lord. I want to finish my series on a healthy mind. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again because it's important. Having a healthy mind is key to having a healthy life. When things are not right here, they're not going to be right here. And so often in life, we deal with the problem, not the root issue. And what happens when we do that, we have a temporary fix, and we think we've got it. And it's just a matter of time where we go right back into the same thing again. And I don't know if you're like me, but those are the times I get discouraged the most, because I thought I overcame that. I thought my perspective changed. But really what happened, I just dealt with the fruit of the problem and not the root of it. And so if things aren't right here, they're not going to be right there. Then here's a quote. Our mind will naturally go in the direction of the patterns that have been developed. Our minds will naturally go in the direction of the patterns that we've developed. In that, I want to tell you there's hope. I want to tell you there's hope. Because if patterns can be developed and patterns can be learned, then they can be unlearned and new things can replace them. That's the exciting thing about life, is it's not just what you see. You can develop what you want the outcome to be, because we're not limited by just our experience and our circumstances. I want to tell you that there's hope in the midst of that. Romans chapter 12, and starting at verse 2, it says this. Don't copy, I've read this to you before, but I'm going to read it to you again because I want to springboard off it. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of the world. Now, I talked about that a few Sundays ago, and I said the copying the behavior is like taking what you see and duplicating it. So he's challenging us here in Romans not to duplicate what you see in the world. Now, everything you see in the world is not wrong. The point is there's things that are going on in the world that don't match what's going on in heaven. And so he's not building a new principle or a new truth that if the world does it, you do opposite. No. There's some things the world does do that's very admirable, and we want to copy that. The principle here is the things that conflict with our new identity. The things that conflict with our new identity. Don't copy the patterns of the world. And then he gives us a solution, he says, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Let God transform you. The interesting, the word transform, I think I talked about it means to reshape or to reform into something different. Not the same. And how that happens is by the way we think, he tells us. He wants to transform you into a person by changing the way you think. Let me tell you this, folks, it is going to take time. It's going to take commitment, and it's going to be consistency in decision making. I just want an easy road. I just want it to happen like that. The reality is, we're going to have to work at it. And the beautiful thing of it is that the Holy Spirit comes alongside and helps us with this aspect. Listen to this. If you aim at nothing, you will always hit nothing every time. If you aim at nothing, well, if it's going to happen, it's just going to happen. No, we have to purpose what we want to have happen. God has spoken so many truths over our life, over our situations, and over our destinies. And those things are basically our potential. God is saying, this is who you are. But unless we line ourselves up with that, we won't see the fruit of that. God has invested everything he has in us because he values us, and he's thrilled to walk alongside us, and he believes in us enough that even when we make mistakes, it doesn't sidetrack his plan. Now, I don't know about you, but that's worth getting excited over. Some of you are looking at me like, when is he done? I told you it's going to be another hour yet. Now it's going to be an hour and a half. If you aim at nothing, you will always hit nothing every time. So I want to give you some things for us to aim at in order to build a healthy mind. Sound good? I want to give us, there's 5 things that I want us to aim at. And when I give you these 5, I'm going to talk about them a little bit, but I don't want you to be discouraged thinking, I'm out. No, I'm telling you these because these are your potential and opportunities. We can do this together. Here are some things to aim for in order to develop and build a healthy mind. First of all, don't let what's behind you set the tone for what's in front of you. Don't let what's behind you set the tone for what's in front of you. How many times have you in your life or know someone in your life that's based their life on what their past experiences have been? I know that'll never work because I have seen it in my own life. That never works. I never get those breaks. There's no point getting excited to what's ahead because there's always trouble, and so therefore that's just my life. My life is trouble with a capital T. And so often we allow what we've experienced and what we've gone through affect us for believing for our future. And I want to tell you, if we want to have a healthy mind and the things that we have to aim towards, we need to aim and set the course of our direction to not let what's behind us affect what's in front of us. Man, sometimes that's so hard for me to do because I get discouraged over here, and then I get discouraged over here, and I get discouraged over here, so then what's the use going any further because I don't want any more discouragement. See, I'm letting what was behind me set the tone for what's ahead of me. I've been praying about something and it just doesn't turn. It just doesn't shift. I don't understand it. Why doesn't God do something? Why isn't things releasing in my life? And so why pray about this now? I don't want to get involved in that. Why? Because it doesn't work. Because we let what's behind set the tone for what's ahead. Paul said something pretty interesting in Philippians chapter 3, I believe. And he says these words. He says, one thing I've learned, to forget those things which are behind. I've learned, he said. So it's something that he had to develop in his life. Because he too at times in his life allowed what was behind him to affect him, to set the tone of what was ahead of him. And so at this point in his life, Paul has made tremendous influences and done great things for God. And yet when he bears testimony to the churches and the things about the Christian life, he says, I've learned this. I've learned to forget those things that are behind and focus on what's ahead. Living in the past will always hold us hostage for the future. Living in what was will keep us back from living in what will be. Our past needs to be the past, where we allow it to be a stepping stone, a platform that we've learned some valuable things, but never to hinder us to going ahead. Don't let what's behind you set the tone for what's in front of you. I have to remind myself of this many, many times because I've had negative experiences in church, and in my mind, I don't want to do certain things because that brings back memories of what was happening and what my experiences was. And so in that, I let what's behind me set the tone for what's ahead of me. There are so many, many beautiful things that God has done in the past. There are things that he's done in the past simply to stir our appetites for what he can do in the future. If God's done that then, wow, what can he do now? I don't know, but that kind of stuff amazes me. Don't let what's behind you set the tone for what's in front of you. The second thing that we think it would be good for us to aim at, and that's this: determined to learn from everything. I have a little note here. Don't waste the moments that you've been given. Determined to learn from everything. Even the negative stuff. Even the stuff that we don't like. Determined to learn from them. I don't know about you, but I'm a bad learner. I don't learn well. I can identify with the Israelites going around the mountain over and over and over, and I just learn hard. Some people, they wipe out. They don't ever wipe out in that area ever again. I'll wipe out there 3 or 4 times because it'll be like, and then I'll talk to myself. Have you ever talked to yourself? Geoff, man, when are you going to learn? You did that last time already. You're going to do that again? I've determined when I go home for lunch, I take my shirt off. because I always spill on it. I spilt this morning when I came to church. I did a protein shake because I wanted to cheat and just have something quick. And I was walking to the car, as I was shaking it, which always happens. Part of the lid comes off. You know the little air pocket thing? You know what I'm talking about in a shaker cup? Man, I got chocolate stuff all over me. It's like, It seems to happen all the time. I knew it was going to happen because it always happens. But if we're determined to learn from our experiences, then we safeguard ourselves from times like that. Now, we can't eliminate stuff like that, but if we learn, we eliminate those things in our life. I want to learn things. I don't want to waste moments that God has given me in experiences that I've faced, even the negative things. If we can't learn from our mistakes or the issues, guess what? We're bound to make them over and over again. I'm not one of these people that says, well, just pray about it. Just pray about it. No, we make a decision. We can make a decision. He empowers us, but not everything's dependent on him. Well, Lord, I just, I don't. And he goes, it's up to you, because I empowered you. I've empowered you. I've given you the ability to overcome. Don't ask me. Declare it and walk it and believe it. So let's learn. Let's be determined to be learners. Third, this is an interesting one. Become a mountain climber. Become a mountain climber. Things in our life, especially when it comes to our mind, that's the obstacle there. We got to learn to overcome those things. When I say a mountain climber, I mean get involved and learn to climb above them. Don't allow the mountain to intimidate you from your experience of victory in your life. Be a mountain climber. I've watched people climb mountains. I mean, they buy certain gear. They have certain kind of ropes. They got certain kind of footwear. They got all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've learned, when I was in the military, I rappelled off the helicopter legs and the helicopter and all those different things. And we learned gear was very important. No one would just jump off holding a string and hoping for the best. And while I prayed about it before I went. Well, God, why didn't you rescue me? Why do I have broken legs and broken feet? Because, you know what? You didn't have the proper equipment. So I'm telling you to be a mountain climber. Don't go at life unprepared. Learn, develop yourself so that when you have a problem in situation, you equip yourself and then you tackle it. Does that make sense? You equip yourself and you tackle it. So a tragedy happens, a difficulty, a frustration comes by. Be a mountain climber. Don't allow that to intimidate you from pushing on further. So much of my life, I've been intimidated by obstacles and things, and I would stop in my tracks. And when I would stop in my tracks, this usually what happens to me. I don't know about you, but to me, then I start feeling sorry for myself. Why does it always have to happen to me? Why can't I when is my day of victory? How come everybody else can climb and I can't? We're talking about giving things to aim for in order to have a healthy mind. Be a mountain climber. If my rope does not hold what I need to hold, I need to equip myself with better ones. If my shoes aren't going to work well for what I need to overcome, I need to change them. I need to start thinking that way. I need to learn to take responsibility for my life. And not blame others for my dilemma, others for my circumstances, but I need to be equipped. Hey, I need to be equipped. It's easy to blame the next person. I have it fun all the time. I blame my wife for everything. Where'd you put my keys? Where's my wallet? How come my phone is missing? I mean, I have all kinds of ways of putting responsibility onto somebody else. When I learn, that's just funny. I'm not serious, but sometimes I am. But when we learn to take responsibility and stop making excuses for it, and we go, no, I can change, so then I'm going to equip myself. Going out and shoveling snow in Sunday, shoes, it doesn't work very well because you spin out and you wipe out all the time, so you have to change, put on some stuff that handles the snow and the ice. But instead, oftentimes, We complain about it's too icy out there, but just change our tire. Be a mountain climber. Because I want to tell you, you are a climber by nature and design. So stretch yourself. Start small, but stretch yourself. Don't stay in the same yard. Have you ever had friends when you were growing up in school that they had to have permission for absolutely everything? Absolutely everything. They couldn't leave the yard unless they had permission. Couldn't ride the bike unless they had permission. Couldn't, do anything unless they had permission. And sometimes a mentality like that, you learn to stay safe. I'm not doing anything until someone tells me to. I'm not exploring because if I explore, I could get lost. You know what the fun part of getting lost is? You blame the person you're with. Well, if you would have had the map, Getting lost, you'll learn to pay attention to details. I remember one time I spoke at 100 Mile House in BC. And I spoke there about 3 times. And it was a good 3.5 hour drive from Vernon. 3.5, 4 hours, somewhere in there. And I did it several times. But I knew there was a turn when I got close to Salmon Arm. I had to make a right turn off the highway. But if you're not paying attention to the details, it's easily missed. It's one of those roads that aren't a main road, but it is. And it's kind of, you got to. And I found myself driving back to Vernon, realizing after about 45 minutes to an hour that things were not looking familiar. And I thought, it's just my mind, it's just my mind playing jokes on me, and it's coming up. And I drove another 45 minutes until I realized I'm lost. Nothing is looking familiar. I started climbing mountain when I never had climbed mountain before. So I stopped at a service station. They said, you're 2 hours behind. Yeah, that's right, no GPS. I had to backtrack 2 hours. I can tell you, I made a lot of observations the next time. Right? Observations. I'm telling you, you and I are mountain climbers. We're never created to sit in the valley and look at our obstacles, wondering when our breakthrough is. When we equip ourselves, because we have the equipment. He's given us everything for life and godliness. So I need to make myself aware of what God's given me so I can equip myself and stop praying about it, but rather putting it on and then climbing. I'm going to overcome. We're just talking about things that aim for in order to build a healthy mind. 4, I'm going to move right along. There's one more after 4, because 4 and then there's 5. See, I did learn that, did something in school. Number 4, I'm going to tell you that we have to learn to be a giver. We have to learn to be a giver. Sometimes, when I'm struggling and going through things that I'm having a hard time overcoming, when I give to other people and help them in their victory, I get perspective and I get victory. So often when we're in trouble and difficulty, we're waiting for someone else to rescue us. When we think like a giver, in the midst of our state of struggle, we want to be a release for somebody else. To practice being a giver. When we're doing great, we got all kinds of ideas. You know what, I'm going to bless this person. I'm going to encourage this person. When I'm talking about giving, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about with our words and with our kindness and with our life-giving and, yes, with our money. Sometimes it's okay to give a gas attendant $10 because he pumped your gas for you, even when you're in a hurry. Sometimes it's good. We need to practice giving when people are serving us. Why? Because we love being served. We love being appreciated. So I want to tell you, if we want to change the things that we aim for, I want to encourage you, start being a giver. Think other people. It's interesting, I put some notes here. Purpose, generosity. It's not always money, but it's time and words and things we value. When I help others, I get a focus off myself and it helps me heal. I get out of the mindset where I just think about my dilemma, but I'm committed to helping somebody else. I have a note here. Use the +1 system. You know what? Have you heard of the +1 system? No one's heard about the +1 system? Well, it's natural because you don't know it. It's my system. Plus one system is, when I'm getting something done for me, I'm going to do something for somebody else. I just think that way. When I go to a gas station and someone pumps my gas, I give them $5 just for serving me. Sometimes when I'm in the restaurant, when I spend a certain amount of money, I want to give that money to the person serving me. I want to think of the plus one because so much of my life is selfish thinking. I'm speaking myself. My victory, my answer to prayer, my thing, my this, my victory, this, blah, 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 blah. And the plus one system is, in my mind, is I'm always going to be here to bless somebody else. So when I have a financial need, I'm going to be someone else's financial miracle. I'm not saying writing out a check for $10,000, but I'm saying sometimes it's doing something out of the ordinary for someone else that costs you something. Because we always have enough for what we value most. Amen? We do. When we value something, I had coffee with someone this past week and I said this to them. If I could tell you that I could double your money in 3 years, but I need $300,000, how long would it take you to come up with $300,000? Keep in mind, I just told you in 3 years, I can guarantee doubling your money. I don't know about you, but I know enough people that I would probably sit down and have coffee with and say, listen, this is a deal of a lifetime. And I would come up with that $300,000 probably within a couple of hours. Why? Because of what's just been given to me. I want to say this. When we love and value people more than anything else, we're going to always have a plus one mentality. Always. Always. Well, I can't afford it. Oh, I can afford where my heart is. I can, right? Throw something at me if you disagree with me, because I'm going to skip. We always have money for what is valuable to us. Always. We always have time for what we value the most. It's interesting. I can be as busy as can be. But when something is my passion, I will find the time. I will sacrifice other things for the thing that I like. So I want us to encourage you to be a giver. Purpose, generosity. Not only at church, but out there. But out there. Out there. Fifth and last thing is that we want to aim for to help us have a healthy mind is learn to give yourself grace. Learn to give yourself grace. You have to understand you and I are in process and that we won't get everything at once. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to run into issues. And I want to tell you that's okay because we're in process. Give yourself grace. Man, I screwed up again. It's okay. And I pick up the pieces. I'm going to learn and I'll go at it again. Give yourself grace. I found this. When I learn to give myself grace, I'm more easy to give it to others. When I'm hardest on myself, I'm hardest on others. Learn to give yourself grace. You know what? You're not perfect. You're not going to make it every time. Every time you line up to bat that bat, your batting average is going to shift and change. If I get up to the batting cages, I won't have the batting average. Oh, I will, 0. Learn to give yourself grace. Yeah, I didn't make it this time, but you know what? That doesn't matter. I'm not discouraged. My life is not defined by my failure. My life is defined by the truth that's been spoken over me, and I'm in process, so I'm keep speaking that truth over me. Oh, but you wiped out Thursday. But you know what? Friday's a new day. I made a mistake. I really screwed up the weekend. The weekend was just not a good weekend. Guess what? Monday's around the corner. Give yourself grace. Sometimes, I remember one time, this was years ago, I was just a young guy learning to preach and learning to be in ministry, and I got really hard on myself, really down on myself, and someone had, the sense to come alongside me and says, well, you know what, as long as you keep splashing in the puddle, you're just going to stay wet and cold. In other words, don't stay there. Get up. Get up. Keep going. Give yourself grace. Do you know why I can say give yourself grace? Because He gives it in abundance. Who am I not to give it to myself? So I can give it to others. Well, I just really screwed up. So what? We all done that. We all been there. Who cares? The problem I have it is when we tell people we care and then we don't. Oh, I'll pray for you, Miss Sister and brother, and all these other terminology we like to use in the church. Really, we just like the information and we really don't want to get involved. The impact people always get involved in people. Always do. Because they've lived through hell, they've lived through difficulty, they've lived through struggle, they lived through situations, and they give life to other people in those same situations. So I'm telling you, there's hope. Are you together? No. Are you messed up? Yep, sometimes you are, and I know it. I see you. But you see me too. But if we learn to give each other grace, it's like we champion each other in the process. I remember playing hockey, and my dad, he'd lean over the boards. Go for it, man. Go. Go. You got this. And all of a sudden, it's like, got a little energy. Yes. And boy, when he told me I screwed up, that just deflated me. Doesn't it? Can I tell you one story in closing? One story only. I promise. I was a goalie. I played for the city of Warman. I was a goaltender. In those years, the city provided you the goal equipment. And so I was goalie. And I could tell you I was great and wonderful, but I can tell you all kinds of stories, just like fishermen tell you stories of how big the fish was, right? And so anyway, we went to Aberdeen, and Aberdeen was a small little town, and they didn't have real ice. I mean, they didn't have artificial ice. They had real ice. And therefore, if it was 35 below outside, it was probably 45 inside. It was freezing cold, and we played there, and period 1, I stopped every shot. Period 2, I stopped every shot. We went into the dressing room in the third period, and it was 0-0, and most often, the team in Aberdeen would waste us. I was stopping everything, but my hands were freezing. The dressing room, they had a little space heater in the corner, and I thought this was so antique. You know, we had artificial ice in Warman, we had heaters, and everything was warm, and so my dad took my goalie gloves and he put it up there and warmed them all up, warmed my hands up, and I went to the third period and we lost 5-0. You know what's funny? You know what my dad said? And he listened, so I have to be careful. If I'd have known that, I wouldn't have warmed up your hands. Why do we always think that the negative motivates us? Why do we think that way? We tell what's wrong, it'll motivate them to do what's right. You know, that's a funny little story that we laugh about. But the reality is we often are wired that way. We tell people what we don't like about them, thinking that's going to help them be who they need to be. Give yourself grace. So what? So what? We're in the process. And when God's starting, man alive, look out world, because we are going to be somebody that changes society. Amen.